Our story begins once upon a time, or to be more specific, on March 20th, 1947 at 2:07 in the afternoon, right here in the beautiful Coulee region of Wisconsin, in a little town about 30 miles from where we are right now called Viroqua. Like in so many other good stories, we start with the birth of a princess. Proud parents, Armin and Gladys Berglund, named their new daughter Sandra Kay. Exactly 24 hours and 48 minutes later, right here in La Crosse, another baby was born, this time a handsome little prince. Baby Robert Duane Seymour was welcomed to the world by his parents Ruth and Duane. When it was time to go home from the hospital, baby Sandra traveled with her family to their home in Ferryville, while Bobby and his mom and dad made their way home to DeSoto. So Sandy and Bob would grow up only 7 miles apart, but they wouldn't meet for almost 15 years. The babies grew up, as babies do. Sandy and her big sister Shirley were joined by Diane, and later baby Debbie was born. Bobby remained the baby of the Seymour family with his big sister Betty. Both grew up working hard in their family businesses, Sandy at the Ferryville Cheese Factory and Bobby at the family feed store in DeSoto. School and church kept the two busy as well, but there was plenty of time for play and lots of neighborhood friends.
In the fall of 1961, Bob and Sandy were both freshmen at DeSoto High School. They first met in band class. Bob sat behind Sandy and used the unique flirting technique of continually emptying his trombone spit valve under her chair. That's a patented Bob Seymour move. Bob's flirting must have paid off, because after only a couple of years, the two found themselves on a double date. The only problem was they weren't on the date with each other. Bob eventually gathered his courage and asked Sandy out on a date, with him this time. By fall 1963, Bob and Sandy were a couple, and they had matching sweaters to prove it. Bob raised money for dinner and movie dates by hustling pool in the back room of the feed store. At the end of their dates, Bob would walk Sandy to the back door to say goodnight. Sandy's little sister, Debbie, would drag out her little rocking chair, plop down, and refuse to leave until Bob gave her a quarter. It's a good thing Bob was good at shooting pool. He needed to be with those Berglund girls around. Bob and Sandy both loved playing in the high school band. Hey, by the way, we're so lucky Sandy traded in her trusty accordion for the saxophone, 'cause I don't think they allow squeeze boxes in the marching band. At one music competition, Bob and Sandy went walking along a little stream with their fellow high school sweethearts, Terry and Donna. Bob watched Terry's smooth moves as he picked Donna up by her waist and swung her around, landing her gracefully by his side. Bob just had to try it. He picked up Sandy, swung her around, and slipped, landing them both in the gooey mud. Full disclosure, they really only went in up to their ankles, but it's funnier this way, isn't it? Like any high school couple in the 60s, Bob and Sandy had a song. Now you have to remember, it was 1963. Everybody was doing the mashed potato. Songs like Surfin' USA and Be My Baby topped the charts. American kids just got their first taste of the Beatles. So it won't come as a surprise to anyone who knows Bob and Sandy that this was their song.
How much is that dog in the window? The one with the waggly tail.
Remember our little prince and princess? It seems fitting that they would grow up to be king and queen. Of the prom, at least.
Before they knew it, it was the spring of 1965, and Bob and Sandy were graduating from high school. They both attended UW-La Crosse for 3 semesters, living in the dorms and working at the cheese factory on the weekends. One warm day, the couple found themselves at Myrick Park, relaxing in the grass. What happened next was a family controversy for years. Just kidding, but there is a rumor that a police officer kicked them out of the park for being indecent. Sandy insists she was just showing Bob the prickly heat rash under her waistband, but you be the judge. On December 18th, 1966, Bob made it official when he proposed to Sandy at the Cavalier Lounge right here in La Crosse. Sandy said yes, and they set the date, September 16th, 1967. Bob and Sandy were married in a beautiful candlelit ceremony at Freeman Lutheran Church just outside of Ferryville. They were surrounded by family and friends. After the reception, Bob and Sandy headed off for a honeymoon week in Niagara Falls. Then it was time to move into their little house next to the cheese factory and start their new lives as a married couple. Bob and Sandy settled into long hours of working side by side in the cheese factory, but they made time for fun too. They started a tradition of taking motorcycle trips around their anniversary each year. In early 1970, Bob and Sandy embarked on their most exciting adventure yet, parenthood. They brought baby Paula home and settled into life as a family of 3. Just 14 months later, she was joined by her sister Jolene. Then 2 years after that, they became 5 with the addition of third sister, Michelle. That's me. By 1975, the family had outgrown the little house by the cheese factory, and they moved down the street to their new home. Bob and Sandy were busy with their growing family and their careers. But they still were a young couple, and they needed to do something to let loose and get away from all their responsibilities. Now you have to remember it was the mid-70s. Disco was groovy. Young people everywhere were searching for peace, love, and freedom. So it won't come as a surprise to anyone who knows Bob and Sandy that they joined bowling leagues.
In 1977, the family grew again when they welcomed son Robbie. For a little while, it seemed maybe the Seymour family was complete. But then, in 1979, baby Janelle joined the family to make them 7. The Seymour family especially enjoyed camping in their trailer, spending weeks and weekends every summer at their favorite spots, Goose Island and Jellystone in Warrens. They even packed up and headed on adventures to Texas and Florida. The 80s were a very busy time for Bob and Sandy. Besides their careers and home life, they were juggling the schedules of 5 active kids. So it wasn't all that surprising that they sought out a fun activity for just the 2 of them, a way to get away from life's craziness for an evening every week. Now you have to remember it was the 80s and Bob and Sandy were still pretty young, just in their 30s. Video games and home computers were becoming commonplace. MTV was born, and pop stars like Michael Jackson filled the airwaves. So it won't come as a surprise to anyone who knows Bob and Sandy that they took up square dancing. In 1987, Bob and Sandy were ready for a change. So that summer they packed up their family and moved to Orland, California. It was an exciting adventure, but it didn't work out the way they envisioned, so less than a year later, they moved back to Ferryville. Bob found a new position in Michigan, and for the next year he would make the 6-hour weekly commute on his Harley, while Sandy stayed in Ferryville, until Paula and Jolene graduated from DeSoto High School. In 1989, Bob and Sandy would pack up the big house in Ferryville for the last time and make the permanent move to St. Joseph, Michigan with their 3 youngest kids.
The busy family settled into their new home on Anthony Drive. Soon they were all as busy as ever in their new schools and jobs. The Seymours found a new church family at St. Luke's where they were all active, especially with the youth group. Before they knew it, Bob and Sandy were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary with a Caribbean cruise. In the midst of all of it were graduations, and with Jolene's wedding, a new son-in-law, Jeff. As much as Bob and Sandy had enjoyed bowling and square dancing, they decided to search for new ways to relax and have fun. Now you have to remember it was the 90s. Grunge was in, and somehow that made Bob's flannel shirts cool. Rap music was in its golden age. And this time, Bob and Sandy surprised everyone when they decided to take up hip-hop dance. And you may not have even known that they formed their own rap duo, BS. Okay, we made that last part up, but their interest turned to travel, and that was pretty cool too. Besides their usual motorcycle trips and family vacations, the Seymours ventured out of the U.S. to France and Spain through Bob's work. They also enjoyed a family trip to London and led their church youth group on a trip to Guatemala. By the year 2000, the 5 Seymour kids were all grown up and mostly out of the house. It was time for Bob and Sandy to earn new titles, Grandma and Grandpa. Riley was born in 2000, and it's safe to say the new grandparents were completely smitten. Drew joined the clan in 2003, and the proud grandparents visited the Collins family in Waunakee, Wisconsin as often as they could while juggling their busy careers and lives. In 2005, life threw Bob and Sandy a curveball. While on their anniversary motorcycle trip, they were struck by a drunk driver and their lives would forever be changed. The next few years would be consumed with surgeries and recovery. Bob and Sandy's new roles as patient and caregiver would only strengthen their love for one another. Fortunately, the years after the accident had lots of good times to balance the challenges. Grandson number 3, Brady, joined the family in 2006, and in between surgeries, the grandparents had lots of time with the 3 Collins grandsons. There were also weddings for Bob and Sandy's 2 youngest kids. Daughter-in-law Amanda married Rob in 2006. And a year later, Janelle and Aaron got married on the beaches of North Carolina. Early retirement brought Bob and Sandy lots of opportunities to enjoy one of their favorite things, travel. The loss of their cherished Harley-Davidson was a disappointment, but in 2007, they traded those 2 wheels in for 6 and headed off on adventures in their new motorhome. Bob and Sandy became snowbirds and have enjoyed their warmer winters and traveling from state to state, visiting friends and family, and meeting new friends along the way. One memorable trip was to Dallas in February 2011 to watch their beloved Green Bay Packers win Super Bowl 45. Being grandparents to 3 boys was fun, and it only got better in 2010 with the birth of Nevaeh, Bob and Sandy's first granddaughter. Grandchild number 5, Ava Grace, joined the family in 2012. And just a month later, her cousin Trinity became number 6. By the time grandchild number 7, Selah, joined the party in 2014, Grandma and Grandpa were used to spending a good chunk of their winters in North Carolina hanging with the girls. The only thing better is when the boys visit and Grandma and Grandpa get to have all their grandchildren together in one place.
Bob and Sandy loved living in St. Joseph along beautiful Lake Michigan, but by 2016, with the kids scattered across the country, they decided to make the move back to Wisconsin to be closer to family and old friends. And so we've come full circle, right back here where it all began. So if you're ever in town, stop on by for a visit. But you better call first, 'cause they might be home, or they might be off visiting the kids and grandkids, or maybe off in the motorhome exploring some new corner of the country. But wherever they are, you can be sure they'll be together, just like they've been for the last 50 years.